Welcome back, fellow aircraft builders and aviation enthusiasts. I'm experimenting with some new equipment. Right now I've got a couple of different microphones and some different camera equipment that I'm using, so I thought this would be another good excuse for me to have one of our little conversational videos rather than a build video at the moment. Rest assured though, I'll be getting back to the build footage very soon. I'm still working on editing some videos on there. The footage is already shot, so bear with me on this. I'm just experimenting with some equipment at the moment. What I want to talk about today is a question that I get asked fairly regularly in the aviation community. And the start of that is, why did I choose the STOL CH 750? There's always a follow-up question to that though, and that's, why am I not building the Cruzer instead? I always find that interesting. I'm not really sure why anyone questions someone else on why they're building a certain plane or why they're not building something that they might prefer. It's perfectly legitimate to ask why somebody chose a specific plane, but to then follow that up with, well, why aren't you building this one instead? It just seems strange to me, but that's a very frequent follow-up question to, especially if someone is building a STOL CH 750. Invariably somebody's going to ask you, why aren't you building the Cruzer? So let's get into that, shall we? So I'm going to give you some history here on where or how I got to the 750, and I'll try to keep that pared down because I don't want to bore you with a whole lot of backstory, but it's kind of important if you're on the fence on what type of airplane that you want to build. How I arrived at the 750 may be relevant to your decision-making process. So, and for those of you that don't know, I'm not trying to talk down to anybody here. I'm just not going to make any assumptions that everybody knows what terminology I'm using. So if you've never heard the term STOL before, STOL is an acronym, STOL, and it's short for short takeoff and landing. And it primarily applies to airplanes that are basically considered bush planes, have a very short takeoff and landing distance, usually are equipped for off-airport operations in rough terrain such as rough fields, meadows, sandbars, beaches, rocky terrain, that kind of thing. They have the ability to land where there isn't a paved runway. So that's, whenever I say the word STOL in this context, that's what I'm referring to. And my STOL CH 750, that's the full model name of the Zenith airplane that I'm building. That's what the STOL stands for, short takeoff and landing CH 750 airplane. So back in 1999, I was researching. I was still in barely still in college. I graduated that year, but I was researching. I knew many years before that I wanted to build an airplane. I had numerous info packets from various manufacturers on all kinds of designs. And after a ton of research, I decided on an all-metal airplane because I didn't know. I like to plan for the unexpected, so I didn't know if I'd always be able to hangar my airplane or if there'd be some point in time where I'd want to tie it down. I didn't want a composite airplane or a tube and fabric airplane if I was going to be tying it down outside. I wanted an all-metal design. At the time, I settled on the Zenith Zodiac 601 design. They had three different versions of the Zenith 601, the HD, the HDS, and then I think there was another one. And right around the time I'd kind of decided that was the airplane I wanted to build, they updated it to the Zodiac XL model. And then now it's the CH 650 model. So that is kind of the fully mature design of the original 601 that they had. So I settled on Zenith because after lots of research and looking at the different manufacturers as well, at the time I wanted to build a kit plane. So I wanted good customer support. I wanted a company that had a long track record of being in business for a long time, lots of examples flying, and good, just a good solid legacy in the aviation world. And Zenith is always at the top of the list for that, as well as Vans Aircraft and Kit Fox and many others. So at the time, my primary flight experience had kind of exclusively been in ultralights. And I wanted something that was going to be faster than that and something that could take me on kind of more remote destinations. And so some of the other designs I considered were Sonex, Kit Fox, like I said, Vans RV before. I looked at some composite designs. I looked at some tube and fabric designs, but I always kind of circled back to Zenith because they had what appeared to be relatively simple aircraft to build. You didn't need a lot of specialized tools, particularly if you were building from a kit. and you know, relatively short build times for a first-time builder. All those things kind of factored into that. So way back in the day, that's kind of the airplane that I decided on. And I also started researching engine options and kind of ended up settling on the Corvair engine conversion. I liked the idea of an auto conversion simply in terms of price and repurposing another engine for flight duty and being able to work on it myself, because I'm not an A&P, so you know, working on a certified engine wasn't really going to be an option for me. And so, you know, being able to maintain the engine myself, you know, lots of things appealed to me about the conversion. I sort of settled on the Corvair because of, at the time, the advertised, you know, conversion price and some things. And please note, I plan on doing one of these types of videos on why I chose the Corvair engine as well. So fast forward to 2004, I started working on my full private pilot license, and most of my training then was in Piper Cherokees. I'd flown a handful of other designs at the time, or other aircraft at the time, but I primarily was doing my training in a Cherokee 140 and then an Archer, Piper Archer. So that kind of reinforced the idea of the 601 because it's a low wing airplane just like the Cherokee was, so I was comfortable. I like the looks of low wing better than high wing. Totally a personal preference. If you like high wing looks better, more power to you. But I just really liked the low wing design, and so it reinforced the idea of the 601, plus that was compatible with the Corvair engine choice. So also in 2004, I finally sourced my Corvair engine core and started working on the conversion. So at that point, I started becoming somewhat married to something that was compatible to the Corvair just in terms of my investment in the engine. So I ended up having a lot of problems working on my Corvair engine due to supplier issues and many other roadblocks there. And so it took me a long time to even get to the point where I am today, and I still don't have an assembled engine because I'm getting a fifth bearing added to it. But there were long times where I wasn't making any progress on the engine, and I originally wanted to finish the engine before I started the plane. So around 2006, I went to the Zenith rudder workshop and built the rudder for the XL, the Zodiac XL, and really, again, reinforced the idea that I could build that airplane at that point. Shortly thereafter, I ordered the blueprints for the Zodiac XL, and still kind of didn't do much with it because I was still working on the engine conversion, or at least spending money on the engine conversion and getting some things modified and parts, you know, ordered and things like that. But not a lot of progress on the plane itself. So in fact, I didn't do any construction on the plane itself. I still at the time was planning on building a kit. Around 2008 or 2009, I started getting back into camping and backpacking and hiking and, you know, wilderness exploration and being outdoorsy and things like that. And I started rethinking a little bit about my choice of the Zodiac XL. Now, at the time, Zenith had the 601 or the Zodiac XL, the 701, and the 801. They also had the 640, but I wasn't interested in a four-place low wing at that time. The 701 was pretty much off the table because of my size and the baggage capabilities that I wanted, the carrying, you know, the useful load that I needed. It also wasn't the best airframe to mate to a Corvair. It can be done, and there are a few examples of those flying, but it's not the best airframe for a Corvair. So you lose even more of your useful load when you put a Corvair in a 701, so, which already is a bit small for my taste. So right around that time, again, this is okay, so in 2008, 2009, when I'm getting back into being outdoorsy, Zenith released the STOL CH 750, the big brother to the 701, and now the little brother to the 801. So that was originally released under the new LSA guidelines. So it had a gross weight maximum of 1,320 pounds. Still looked to be a good fit for me. It was comparable in, you know, gross weight and payload of the 601 XL or the Zodiac XL. And so I started thinking about that airplane, thinking that it would be an excellent match for, you know, kind of like off the beaten path camping and, you know, hiking and things like that. I could get out into wilderness that I couldn't get to by car, or that would take me forever to hike to. So the idea of exploring with a bush plane just really appealed to me. So in 2011, I contacted Zenith, let them know that I had decided to build the STOL CH 750 instead of this Zodiac XL. And they graciously allowed me to sort of exchange and upgrade my plans package to a 750. So I sent back my old plans. I hadn't started construction on the airplane at all. And they, for a modest fee, printed me a set of 750 plans and mailed those to me. Very, very happy and felt very fortunate that they were willing to do that. And so I got the 750 plans and decided that was the airplane. You know, after deciding that was the airplane I was ready to build. And then shortly thereafter, I started working on tooling. I started building form blocks and started working on making a few test parts here and there. I ended up then having, of course, a long hiatus from that, but that's when I started building the airplane. In a previous video, I mentioned I only had about 20 hours before I put everything on hold for another 3 years, but really pretty well married to the STOL design, works with the Corvair engine perfectly. And I'm very happy with the choice and still very happy with the choice. So the big question I get from there is, you know, why did I choose the STOL CH 750? Why not the 701 or the 801? Zenith doesn't sell blueprints for the 801. They only sell it as a kit with a builder manual. So Zenith does not support, and Zen Air up in Canada does not support the 801 as a plans built package. In 2011, when I decided on the 750, I kind of pulled the trigger on plans building at that point because I realized that the kit building, you know, me being able to afford even sub kits or sub assemblies always just seemed to be out of reach for me, whether it was my own discipline with my own finances or whatever. I just was never able to pull that trigger and order a several $1,000 chunk of kit to start working on a kit plane. So I also decided at that time to go ahead with scratch building and got into it that way. And after I made those first few form blocks and parts in 2011, I was convinced that I could build the whole airplane at that point because it's just so straightforward and, you know, I don't want to say easy, but in terms of metal fabrication and home building, Zenith has got to be one of the easiest airplanes to build from scratch. I mean, it just, hands down, it's got to be one of the easiest ones to do. And so 801 is off the table. Furthermore, I was kind of sitting around the, you know, LSA camp thinking, well, if I don't want to maintain my medical, or if I can't maintain my medical, then the LSA is a valid category for me, and the 750 can be built to that standard. The 801 cannot because it's a 4-passenger, you know, that kind of thing. The 701 strictly off the table due to the payload, like I mentioned earlier, but the 750 can be built to LSA standards. Now, fast forward to this new third-class medical, you know, issue, and Zenith updated the 750 to the 3rd edition plans, which gave it another bump up in the gross weight rating and hence payload rating. The 750 is a very much more flexible design now, and that goes for the Cruzer too. So now I have the option of building it as an LSA, or excuse me, I have the option of registering as a experimental light sport or amateur built light sport, or an experimental amateur built with the full gross weight capability. And the plane is identical either way. It's just how you certify it with the FAA. So I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, when I'm ready to, you know, certify this airplane. It's probably going to do it under experimental amateur built with this third-class medical stuff that's going on. But like I said, the 701 was kind of off the table due to the payload, and it wasn't a good match for the Corvair. So the big follow-up question I get, like I mentioned earlier now, is why am I not building the Cruzer? That almost always comes from folks that have this idea that you're probably not going to use the STOL capabilities of the airplane anyway, and the Cruzer flies faster, which means you're going to get further on less fuel. And there's a lot of people out there that are pulling the leading edge slats off their STOL aircraft and putting vortex generators on instead. There's a lot of people out there that are complaining about how slow and draggy the 750 is, and I'm thinking, yeah, but we all knew that from the beginning. I mean, that was the case when it was released. I mean, it's a slow, draggy airplane. I mean, that's not anything new. So, but again, it's, you know, you're never going to use the STOL capabilities anyway. You're probably going to fly from an airport anyway, so why bother building the STOL? Why not build the Cruzer? Well, the Cruzer wasn't available when I bought my blueprints from Zenith, and they are very different airplanes in a lot of respects. The tail section is completely different. The wing is different. I mean, that's, you know, 75% of the airplane. So, There's a lot of differences there. They're very similar to build, and they're very similar processes used to assemble them, but make no mistake, they are different airplanes. So I could put a Cruzer wing on my STOL and go into some uncharted territory if I wanted to now, but again, I'm not interested in that. I want the STOL because I want short takeoff and landing capabilities. And I'll get into some of the performance specifications here in a moment, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Who decides what airplane I should build? Who decides what the best airplane to build for me is? Well, guess what? That's me. And in your case, that's you. You decide what airplane you want to build, and it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks. Now, if you decide based on the information that you have available on one particular airplane or another, and then change your mind later, like I did, you're free to change your mind, that's fine. But it always just strikes me as odd how many people kind of want to challenge me on why I'm building the STOL CH750 and not the Cruzer. It's perfectly legitimate to ask me why I chose one over the other. Totally legitimate to ask that question. I just find it odd that people then follow that up with, well, you should be probably building the Cruzer, or it doesn't make sense that you're not building the Cruzer, or whatever. It doesn't have to make sense to them, it only has to make sense to me. So I'm not getting defensive about it or anything like that, but it just is a strange line of questioning sometimes. I might ask you why you chose to build a Sportsman 2+2, or maybe a Kolb, or a Kit Fox. I might say, hey, what made you choose that design? Great, but then I'm not going to go, well, you probably should have built this one instead. I would never say that to somebody. Why would anyone say that to anybody? You're not them. Anyway, enough of that. For me, the STOL makes sense because I want that full STOL capability. I'm going to practice flying it that way. I may then try to use it to its maximum capability. I like the challenge. I want to learn how to fly more or less like a bush pilot, maybe actually do some real bush pilot type flying. And yes, I'm a low time pilot, and I'm not an Alaskan bush pilot or a Canadian bush pilot. I'm not anybody like that. I'm not going to be pushing the edge of the envelope. I'm not going to be, competing at Valdez every year. But I want the full capability. I want to be able to land in shorter distances, take off in shorter distances. So even though I may not ever need the full STOL capability on any given flight, I want to challenge myself and push myself and learn how to fly it that way. That's just because that's what I want to do. The Cruzer is an excellent airplane, and in its own right, a fairly short takeoff and landing capable aircraft. But you'll see when I read off some of these performance numbers, it's not nearly as good as the STOL CH750, at least on paper. So just remember that. You don't have to justify the choice to anyone but yourself. It is a big decision to decide what airplane to buy, and you're the only one that can make that decision after you do what you feel is enough research and gather enough information to help you make that choice. It's perfectly okay to build a STOL aircraft if you just simply like the way it looks and could care less what the performance is. You just want it to look like that. And so if that's what you decide, great. If you decide to go with a Cruzer, that's fine too. You decide to build a P-51 Mustang replica, go do that. No problem. Just make sure it's the right decision for you, and don't pay any attention to the naysayers or people that tell you shouldn't build that airplane or you should build something else. I'm not going to get into skill levels and, should you be building a P-51 Mustang if you've never built an airplane before, but, just strictly on a model design choice. It's a highly personal choice. It's based on a lot of factors, and you're the only one that can really answer that question for you. Don't worry about if people are challenging you on, whether you should build a STOL CH750 over or a Cruzer instead. I mean, to me, that's just silly. So let's talk about performance numbers, and this is kind of reinforces why I am building the STOL CH750 rather than the Cruzer. Again, the Cruzer wasn't available when I got started, so then I'd have to get into do I buy another set of blueprints? Do I see if Zenith will sell me the one page for a different wing, or whatever? I'm married to the STOL CH750, and I'm perfectly happy with that. Even though the Cruzer has a bigger panel and hence more room for avionics and radios and all the fun high-tech stuff, I would still choose the STOL CH750 over the Cruzer for the flight capabilities alone. So let's talk about some of the Zenith performance comparisons. So the 650, which is the mature design of the Zodiac XL that I was going to build, that has a max cruise or a relative cruise speed of 138 miles per hour depending on configuration. It has a full flap stall speed of 44 miles an hour, and has a takeoff and landing distance roll of about 500 feet, and it has a useful load of about 625 pounds. lots of load carrying capabilities there, but you know, and certainly short takeoff and landing compared to other airplanes. And it can be built as a tail dragger if you like. So good solid airplane there. Still wouldn't mind having that airplane someday, but let's compare that to the 701. The 701 is the original STOL design from Chris Heinz at Zenith Aircraft. That has a cruise speed of 85 miles an hour with a 100 horsepower Rotax engine, a 28 mile an hour stall speed. That's roughly 2/3 the stall speed of the CH650. A takeoff roll of 50 feet and a landing distance of 80 feet. Those are fantastic numbers. They're probably a little optimistic for the average pilot, but those are fantastic numbers compared to the 500 feet takeoff and landing roll of the 601 or the 650. But it only has a useful load of 520 pounds. So it's a little on the light side and a little on the small side for us full-framed guys and gals. So let's talk about the STOL CH750. So this is the newly revised, it's basically a redesigned 701 to meet the light sport category. 100 mile an hour cruise speed, again, might be a little optimistic depending on the configuration. 35 mile an hour full flapper on stall speed, 100 foot takeoff roll, and 125 foot landing roll. So while the takeoff roll is 100 versus 50 for the 701 and 125 versus 80 for the 701 on the landing distance, that's still way better than the 500 feet takeoff and landing roll of the 650. And then for the gross weights or payload capabilities, if you certify it under an LSA rule, you've got a 545 pound payload. And then if you certify it under experimental amateur built to the 3rd edition plans, you've got a 665 pound payload, which is a substantial amount of people, fuel, and baggage. Now the Cruzer changes the aerodynamics of the tail section and the wing, cleans up some of the drag, and has a published cruise speed of 118 miles per hour. So 15 to 20 miles an hour faster than the STOL, another 15 miles an hour faster than the 701, but still a little slower than the 650. The stall speed is 39 miles per hour compared to 35 for the STOL CH750. And then it's got a takeoff and landing roll of 350 feet. And then the weights are very close to the STOL. It's 540 pound payload at ELSA and 660 pound payload at the experimental amateur build. So you can see, at least on paper and according to Zenith's design specifications, the STOL CH750 lands in almost a quarter of the distance that the Cruzer does, or takes off and lands at roughly a quarter to half the distances. 100 feet takeoff roll versus 350, 125 foot landing foot roll versus 350. So if you can get anywhere near these performance figures in your final project, the STOL CH750 is a much more capable airplane for short field operations, short field takeoff and landing. And you know, it doesn't come with wheel pants like the Cruzer can be had with wheel pants. You know, you can put bigger tires on it. You know, there's lots of differences there. It's a more rugged airplane. It's a little beefier in spots. It's dual strut braced on the wings instead of single strut braced. And there's things that you can do to it to make it even more capable off airport, which is to droop the leading edge slats a little bit and then add vortex generators to the elevator so you get even more slow flight control. So I hope that gives you some insight as to why I chose the STOL CH750 in the first place, why I would still choose that airplane today as my first airplane project. And maybe that also helps you reinforce your decision on your own aircraft. I am not advocating that you build any particular airplane, whether it's from Zenith or another aircraft manufacturer or anything else, or a particular model from any one of them. You have to decide what's right for you, which airplane you want to build, and move forward from there. So anyway, thanks for sticking with me on this video. If you have any questions about anything or you'd like some clarifications, feel free to shoot me a message or a comment. And stay tuned for the next video. I'm going to be doing one on why I chose the Corvair real soon. And I'm also going to be releasing a few more of the horizontal stabilizer build videos and the elevator build video here pretty soon. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. That's all for this video. Be sure to like, comment, or subscribe, and let me know if you have any requests for future video content. As always, thanks for watching, and good luck with your projects.